Have such a beautiful bunch of people here today. This is what makes it really special for us. Is there's a part of the world that says that people don't matter, that structure matters, organisations matter, but I think a lot of us reckon that people matter, and that's one of the reasons why we're here. And that people looking after country, living on the earth, living with the earth matters. Yeah, thank you. So, Beyond Bunya Dieback Project, one of the reasons we've called it Beyond Bunya Dieback is we didn't want to just sit with just talking about dieback, because it's a very negative thing in itself. It could be self-generating. And it's good to talk to other people. Again, like Karen said, talk to other people from around the world. And we didn't go too far, but we had conversations with Mita and Māori practitioners working with ecological restoration in Aotearoa, and a good bit of feedback is words are powerful, and that we need to look at a language that sort of moves beyond that, just focusing on the dieback. And we've very much played with that with the Beyond Bunya Dieback. So that's why it's called what it is at the moment. This will evolve, life evolves. But at the moment, Brush Turkey Enterprises has put together this Beyond Bunya Dieback project. Karen's just disappeared, but what an amazing woman that she's put all this together. We'll get her again later. So, thank you very much, Anizitha, for welcoming us to Uniborough country. I'd like to say that again at the beginning of my my presentation. You've probably all read that by now, so I don't want to sort of go over it too much. But a crucial thing for me is Indigenous people, people who are connected to the earth, people who are connected to the earth that their ancestors have lived on, people who are committed to a piece of country that their children will live on for generations to come, have a special relationship with the earth and the country. They have a lens of looking at the world and a heart to way to look at the world that many of us are missing as we move around in our busy little lives from here to there. And I think we've got to tap into that knowledge of always living on country as is, and Indigenous people always will lead the way in healing country. Next slide, thank you. And I want to talk about the amazing biodiversity just briefly. I always give this usually early on in one of my presentations, is what we're looking at in southeast Queensland and northern New South Wales is a world biodiversity hotspot. So you'll hear me, if you've been to my presentations, I'm always sticking this in there, but I think it's a point worth reinforcing, because we're always talking about, if we're working on an environmental level, we're always talking about, the damage that's being done in Indonesia to their forests, and the damage that there's been done in Brazil to the Amazon. These third world people don't know what they're doing. We've done it. We've done that to this country. Sorry, the colonial mindset has done that to this country. Not all of us. And it's really eating into this amazing world biodiversity hotspot. Like 60% cleared, doesn't still got nearly 40% of it. I think that figure's probably shrunk a bit since then, and it's so fragmented. It's really being damaged, and we need to set a mindset that acknowledges that and finds ways to come back from that, because it is one of the most amazing places on the planet as far as this biodiversity goes. 3,500 species of native plants. There's we'll move on to the next slide. 2,600 for the Sunshine Coast. It could be closer to 200. There's the way these some of this data that is collected these days can be not quite ideal. Thanks to some cuts in the way these things are done on an environmental level. Thank you for Andrew for introducing us before, but let's acknowledge that there has been cuts to the way that we look at environment, thanks to some governments in the recent past. We've basically got a lot of plants here on the Sunshine Coast, and that's obviously one of my big things, if anybody knows me. And we've got lots of threatened plant species, lots of endangered, lots of vulnerable, and all the fauna, although it's a crawly hairy, scaly things as well that make their way around the plants that, you know, I should acknowledge. But and then the fungi that's not even touched on. You know, we don't know about our fungi. I think we've got, you know, just a few people paid for by the state who are looking at fungi, if at all these days, when it should be, you know, an area the size of Queensland should have dozens, if not hundreds of people looking at this sort of stuff. So that's in the Sunshine Coast Biodiversity Report 2020. Let's move on to the next slide. I just wanted to, I tend to work around pictures and a few keywords in my presentations. This is one of my favourite spots to go and appreciate how amazing bunya are. A lot of people tend to think that we've got the good old bunyas are all at the Bunya Mountains, and it's mainly because the bunyas, and nothing wrong with the Bunya Mountains, bunyas are some of the most amazing ones around, and we all should go out, well, no, we shouldn't all go out there, but we should acknowledge that they are there. But it's quite different in the country up there. Bunya tend to be on the top of the range. And there were bunya on the top of the range here, but as you'll see in another slide, a lot of that country was cleared. But a lot of our big bunya are in valleys around, like Condalilla is the most accessible one you can see. If you stand at the lookout at Condalilla and look down across the falls and look down the valley, you'll see these beautiful big emergent bunyas coming up along the creek there. And this is an area out the back of, I think it's Maleny National Park. I'll just call it Walleye. This particular area, Chinaman Creek. So there's this bunya in the foreground, but down in that valley, there are the biggest bunyas I've ever seen on the range. There are bunyas that appear to be 30 to 40 metres high. And when I was out there a few years ago, we were looking across it at this patch of bunyas, and then we noticed. I was out there with a friend, and we both said at the same time, "Can you see that one?" And all of a sudden we noticed this bunya that rose twice the height of these other massive bunyas. And we were trying to work out whether it's sitting on a rock, but it couldn't have been because it was that close to the others that they were around it. So we have these massive bunyas. The highest bunya recorded that seems to be on record on available information seems to be only about 40 metres, but we've got bunya way bigger than that. This will come up in Midda's talk. He'll try and top us as far as the height of the kauri with the bunya, but we've definitely got bigger bunya out there that just haven't been measured. I'm sure we've got bigger kauri out there that just haven't been measured either. It's really interesting looking at some of the historical imagery. So it's a place that was settled by a family called the Nothlings, and it's out of Witter where the Curramore Road and Schultz Road takes off Curramore Road. And you can see bunya in the background there. And you can see the odd scattered bunya in the paddock these days, but this is an indication that we had this bunya forest. And I was looking through a series of photos the other day, and Witter appears to be more bunya country. North Maleny would have been bunya country, and obviously Broome would have been bunya country. All we've got left really of our rainforest patches up here is somewhere like Mary Cairncross, not bunya country. Got to move a little bit further north, but perhaps it was too wet on the front of the range there, or the south face of the range. But it's just so nice to, well, it's so sad as well in a way to look at what's lost. But this bunya country, that's called the Nothling Vineyard. And I've cut most of it out because I wanted to see the bunyas in the background, but it was all about the clearing of the scrub to put the grapevines in. So next slide, please. And this is the fragmentation of our landscape. So in the bottom right-hand corner is Mary Cairncross, and that's one of the few patches of forest that's on the flattish country at the top here. The rest of the high country, Witter moving up into the top left-hand side of that picture there, is where a lot of that bunya country would have been. That's all been cleared out. So we're dealing with this fragmented landscape. Why am I saying this? That's all water under the bridge. It's crucial to understand what's happening now as to why we're getting these dieback issues. Next slide, please. So a quick history of the Bunya Dieback project that we've been doing. So just starting off as Bunya Dieback. January 20, we were out of the bunyas and we noticed that the bunyas were dying out there. I thought, that's a bit, what's going on? And in February 2020, we were requested some tube stock of bunyas from DAF. by Dr. Louise Shuey, who presented last year, doing her research on Phytophthora and bunyas. And she was basically going to infect their seedlings. And I said, they can come home afterwards, can't they? And she said, no, probably not. But on the positive side, she found it, this will get discussed later, she found it really hard to infect the seedlings. So remember that. Even though Phytophthora might be present, it doesn't necessarily kill them. So that was one of the observations she found at that stage. And then, not too much later in that year, we noticed there were a few bunyas dying on the range. So people who have come up from on the Landsborough Maleny Road today, our iconic sculpture is slowly fading. There was a whole heap of this is the dead patch of bunyas that was on the road on the way in. That's the one that people tend to see, or people notice all the time. But the majority of them have been cut back down by TMR about 2 weeks back. I think it was 2 weeks today. Yeah, so they were the first ones we noticed, and they all went within 2 to 2.5 years. All those trees had died, which apparently is very quick for an infestation a disease, let's not call it infestation yet, a disease to move through a patch that quickly. In July 2021, so almost a year later, as I'm prone to grand statements, I wrote an article that went in the local media, Are We Facing Bunyageddon? Which was a bit of a negative way of looking at it, I must admit, but I was trying to motivate people. And that was about the death of the bunyas up here, and we had a lot of public uptake on that since, in a positive way, I'm hoping. But yeah, a lot of fear out there about these bunyas dying back. And then we started recording from that article. We asked people to let us know if they had bunyas dying that they were concerned about, and we generated unfortunately a fair bit of records from around the range. The tricky bit has been collecting, identifying the disease, and this has changed as of yesterday, which is kind of cool, because having these conversations generates more stuff to happen. But we haven't been able to do any coordinated funding for coordinated research into what's actually killing them. It's a dieback. That is indisputable, but it's which Phytophthora is causing the multi-causal factor which is killing these trees, because there are other things killing these trees as well that's relating to that. It's the Phytophthora plus other stuff. And then we created a iNaturalist project for people to do records. Unfortunately, we're doing most of the records because a lot of people that have the dead bunyas on their blocks don't know how to use iNaturalist, so it's a bit of a tricky one to get that record across there. So for the moment, we're doing the bulk of the records. We did start with the Uniborough Ranges at the end of last year. We're going to progress that a lot more this year, is turning that into a project for the Uniborough Ranges. Is going to be doing a lot of the recording and getting that all happening. And that's the way it should be. The Uniborough should be very important, leading this role, and we want to help facilitate that, and hopefully can. 2 sites were surveyed at the end of mid-23, and we came up with Phytophthora cinnamomi, which raises more questions than it gives answers, because Phytophthora cinnamomi appears to be just about everywhere. It's quite a widespread fungus, has been up here, water mould, not fungus, water mould that's been up here for at least 40 to 50 years, with the avocado industry being the first to record the impact of it, because you only usually find it when it's damaging an economic source. So that's what we've got so far, this Phytophthora. So next one, there's some of the sites that we've recorded around the range. That northern cluster is Witter. So again, back to that, it is probably more likely to be bunya country up there. Natural bunya country, they're trees and paddocks. The majority of the trees that we see recorded here are, fortunately or unfortunately, on rural land, so in cow paddocks, or rural residential. So quite scattered, quite widespread, but definitely dense clusters up in Witter. And that's possibly because there's more trees up there, rather than the disease is more rampant and causing more damage up there. Probably based more on a percentage thing. That's an idea of what they look like. So it's not just this is one out at Witter, so it's not just the Maleny Landsborough Road patches that look like that. This is a cluster that's gone on quite quickly. Unfortunately, we will probably see when this particular weather event of wet weather dries out, we're going to see a lot more death again. Because this is the pattern. Is this wet, phytophthora spreading during the wet, and then as soon as you get a dry period, it hit quite early last year. We were away for a month and got back to Australia mid-June, and a whole heap of trees I was noticing dying because we've been away. We've been during the wet weather. We've been away when it started to dry out. And as we came back, we noticed these trees dying in the landscape, even in winter, and that's because the phytophthora is spreading, damaging roots during the wet weather, but it's so wet it doesn't matter too much because there's enough water in the ground to maintain the tree. And then as soon as it starts to dry out and there's a bit of stress, that's when you start losing the tree and you start seeing the whole tree go at once. We had a particularly interesting event just after that was get ready for big bunya times in the early 26 because there's a massive amount of cones coming on at the moment. So late mid last year, it was a huge flowering event with the males. And so they've got a long cone, called pencils, all on the end of the branches, and they're brown. And so I was getting contacted all over the place saying, my bunyas are dying. And I said, just send me a photo. And it was this male flowering event. It's like, that's okay. So it was a big year for the boys this year. And obviously the girl cones are hidden up in there somewhere as well. But there's lots and lots of little cones coming on as a result of that. Isn't that amazing? They take nearly 18 months I think it's 16 months to develop from flowering through to the fruit dropping. Okay, next slide. Dieback observations. So generally in that rural residential area, saplings, smaller trees not necessarily affected. I'll show you a photo in a second, but we'll leave that there for now. One of the unfortunate things we've seen with the kauri in New Zealand is it kills everything. You know, if it's in an area, it just seems to kill everything, whereas we seem, I don't want to say lucky, but the seedlings and the smaller trees and the saplings seem to survive the phytophthora coming through. It seems to it's causing damage to the trees, the bigger trees, and they just can't cope with that when they're drying out again. There's no real, if we go by the law, there's no prescribed treatment available specifically for bunya yet, so it's hard to get that advice. I think that could change quite rapidly this year for the first time in 4 or 5 years that this has been looked into. And there's certainly people doing stuff with phosphite, the treatment that's generally used on avocados and other trees. And I just got some video and data from a guy down, of all places, in Albury Botanic Gardens, down on, I can't remember if that's Victoria or New South Wales border, which side it is. And they had a massive bunya in there that had got sick, and they injected that, and it seems to, the tree's not what it was before, but it started dying. So it's whether we want to be doing that sort of stuff down the track. That's obviously a big treatment that they use with kauri in New Zealand. But so it is probably become more of an option if we've got trees that we want to save on. You know, if you're a resident, you know, you've got a tree that's dying on your block. Hopefully by the end of this year we'll be able to say, do it this way. And if you really need to do it now, just apply the basic method that they recommend on the instructions, so to speak. So it's obviously raised a lot of community concern. A lot of people saying, what are we going to do about bunya dieback? Can we just fix it like that? Like that? And we can't. I don't think, I'm not, it's not that I'm being pessimistic, it's just that we're being realistic. This is something we're going to be dealing with for years, decades, maybe a century until we start straightening things out. And one thing I'll always come back to, that Indigenous view of land, of country, is we've got to develop this intergenerational way of looking at country and healing it. We can't operate in these tiny time frames and expect things to happen. That's half the problem. But yeah, so the community concern is certainly out there. We've got to harness that and help people work as best we can with addressing some of these dieback issues at the moment. I think it's certainly a symptom.
I was going to say, so you like create a 500-year plan or something like that?
That'd be lovely. I'd love a government to come back with something like that. But yeah, I don't know whether that's quite going to happen yet, but I think we're working on it. I'd like to see that in my lifetime. So yeah, it's definitely a symptom rather than, we need to be addressing this, how we look at the ecosystems, how we look at country overall. The next one, please. I quickly just wanted to point out, so this is a big dieback in just outside of Lake Baroon. The guys at Lake Baroon took me down to see the Lake Baroon Catchment Care Group. So to the left are a heap of dead and dying bunya, or mature bunya. There's a muddy track downhill of it, and then there's a bunya sapling. So this was reinforcing that observation that it doesn't seem to be impacting the saplings and smaller trees as badly as the bigger trees, even when it's present. So that should be classic worst case scenario for that little bunya, is you've got a muddy track with the phytophthora running through the soil, but the little fellas, well, this was close to 6 months ago, hopefully still okay. But that's not an ideal scenario, and then one of the things was to address some of the flood patches on the tracks to stop transfer throughout the site. So I'm not saying it's in that track, but it certainly would appear that it could be close, if not possible, given that the mitamite shows an amazing image of the size of the root systems on some, the agathis, the kauri. So I'm saying that it'd be pretty similar with bunya, which means the roots would be well out underneath the track, touching that little bunya of the big trees as well. Okay, next one, please. And it's a bit of a tangent, but probably needs to be it will be discussed more as time goes on. But it's a loss of health across country. It's not just the bunya, it's what we're seeing on the glasshouse mountains. We've got Justin from QBWS talking about the dieback on the glasshouse mountains. These iconic points, sacred places in the landscape, whether it be the bunya or the glasshouse mountains, are being impacted. Why? I haven't got an answer. I think we need to go away and think about this quietly to ourselves and think about what's going on. But this dieback is a serious issue. And why is it targeting these things? Like the bunya is dying because of Phytophthora cinnamomi, which is all widespread through the landscape. It's indicative of, I keep saying it again and again, the way we treat country and the way the health of country at the moment. So Beyond Bunya Dieback Project, so we moved into that. And these two symposiums, and it's so good. Last year was a great, and I thought this year will be a bit of a fizzer after last year. There's no way we can top the quality of the people that were there last year. And look at you all, it's fantastic to have everybody here. And it's just getting so much momentum. And there's Karen back there. Now we can all say, can we give Karen a round of applause for drawing us all together? And I always undermine as saying, we're just a little barn and par business, family business, working away, and we get these crazy ideas and we think, we've got to do it, we've got to do something about this. And it gives us the freedom to do that, and we get people talking to each other, and we talk to people all over the place. And it seems like we're making a few things happen, which is really cool. So we're working with that ongoing data collection that is really going to accelerate over the next few months, I'm hoping. Can't talk too much about that yet, but believe me, there's some good ground being made there. I managed to squeeze in 2 international trips last year. We went to Sweden for our son's wedding, and we went to Aotearoa for the kauri research, and probably not too good for our carbon footprint, but she's already planting a lot of trees since. But it's good to see people doing things in a different place. And it was good actually being on the way to the UK, and I've always grown up, I was 8 when we left the UK, and you always grow up that mentality. A lot of Europeans and a lot of European descended people tend to look at Europe and think, oh, isn't it beautiful rolling green hills and little sheepies on the hills, and I just went back this time and I thought, sick country, my own country. So we're quite acknowledging the industrial landscape, post-industrial landscape now. That's the reason why parents ended up here as economic migrants, as economic refugees on a boat, in 1977, the last of the 25-pound bombs. But yeah, we're going to do that in this discussion today. We've got California, we've got Western Australia. I was reading this thing, watching this video the other day in Italy. They've got an olive dieback. This is global. It's how we're treating the world, how we're treating the earth, how we're treating country, whatever words we want to use. We've got these diebacks happening everywhere, and we've got to start asking some serious questions as to why that is happening, which has led to all this networking and advocacy and all this stuff that we're doing in 25. I'm going really good for time. Is there another slide? So I just wanted to briefly, I wanted to put this picture in, and I thought, you just can't even capture it. You can't capture the magnificence of this particular tree, Te Matua Nahere, the father of the forest. 5.25 metre diameter across the base, absolutely huge. You might have heard of Tane Mahuta, the father of the forest. He's the big one that everybody likes to go and see. If you do go to New Zealand, make sure you clean your boots when you go in there. The boardwalk access to these areas, do it respectfully. But this fella is absolutely huge. And at the top, what you're seeing, he's close to 30 metres high, he's just under 30 metres. But he's split open. There's a whole forest growing out the top of this big father. And it's surrounded by all these they're just incredibly impressive. It's like a Bunya Mountains experience to go out there and be impressed by these huge trees. Te Matua Nahere, father of the forest. And the next one, that's Tane Mahuta. So we went all the way up to, this was a 3 or 4 hour drive. This is what we got up to there first. So we can't go in. Entitlement, come all the way here. And I was really impressed. I thought this is really good. Because the Whaitawhara he's only about 60 metres off the road, and the Waipula Ranges. And I'm just going to put that out there. Meta's probably going to talk about it more, the concept of rahui. And it's giving a place a rest when it needs a rest. Because there's more and more of us, more and more humans who feel entitled to be in a place wherever we want, all the time. We should be able to go there. We should be able to walk here. We should be able to climb this. And the impact of that is huge because there's so many more of us. There's so many humans on the planet. It's got to add up. All those footsteps, all that transmission. All those nutrients that we move around in our bodies and express into the landscape without even thinking about it. Was that a very polite way I put that? Rahui. So sometimes we shouldn't be able to go everywhere all the time. Sometimes we need to give places a rest, if not for spiritual reasons, for ecological reasons. Next one. In summary, we all need to plan for healthy country, resilient ecosystems. We all need to regenerate diverse, resilient ecosystems. I've come from a background of ecological restoration, but I'm very much taking on board and learning of this indigenous way of viewing country. And I use some of the language interchangeably because I think we should be able to use the words back and forth. We need to improve soil health and resilience. That's a crucial one. So many tangents. The reason we have massive flooding in our river systems is because our hills, they sheet water off them. They should be deep, porous soils that absorb the water and release it gently over time. Whereas they act like drains. They hit the top, they just run down and smash up the lower parts of the country. We all need, so I very much talk around all this first stuff. I think we need to look at these things before we address the disease. But we can't escape the fact that there is disease and we need to do temporary measures without losing sight of the bigger picture stuff at the top there. And we need to reduce that transmission movement of pathogens. If we follow the New Zealand example, it has pretty massive implications for us because, especially with something like Whaitawhara, it's like what are we going to do for Blackall Range for the first 6 months of the year when it's muddy and raining all the time, when we should be walking around because we're going to be transmitting the Phytophthora and other diseases around? There's a big question, yeah. We all need to live with and within an ecosystem, the biosphere, the healthy country. Next one. Just to end, beautiful little bunya seedlings. That's a winter photo. Do you know how I can tell that's a winter photo? Because they're all facing north. The sun's running a little bit north there. All the little bumps are all leaning over, saying, "You're amazing, sun. I love feeding from you." That's all those little bunya seedlings. They're all way up here now somewhere. But during the winter, I just thought it was such a cute little photo to capture. And isn't that nice to connect with an entity like the bunya, to be able to, as me, I just wanted to end on that note. I was going to start on that, but one of the big things I've always talked about in the past in regen is to try and reduce chemical usage in regeneration. Pierre and Rachel are going to be ending on this conversation today, so I hope you're all staying today, because it's such an amazing flow of conversations. But one of the big things I've talked about was successional weed management. So are some weeds okay in the system if we can beat them with succession? Can they help heal the ecosystem, help them heal country as it progresses all the way back again? Do we need to spray and kill everything all the time? Are all weeds bad? And my argument was, all weeds can't be bad because I'm a weed. I'm a self-professed weed. And I'm a weed on this country. So maybe if I spin it around and look at, we ask ourselves, can we help that healing of country, help that succession, help that move back to the native vegetation? Are all weeds bad? So self-professed weed, I need to have that. People read it on when you just have weed on your t-shirt. You know. That's a long discussion. I think that's it. Go and check out this amazing exhibition. Thank you so much.